Previously on the Trismegistus Academy, Alsaya Laughmani represented her school, the Ludum Academy for Fiersome Fighters, as their top student when visiting the Trismegistus Academy, or TAHE for short. But during this visit, her intent was not to return to her school. The LAFF is a horrible place where the students may be training to get stronger, but if they can't keep up, Headmistress Elloise Ludum, or one of the other faculty, may not let them live it down. Literally. Alsaya began attending believing Ludum could help her discover who killed her superhero/overseer sister, Delilah. But now she's found that sticking around isn't worth it, and the faculty at TAHE may be better suited to help her, if she can only get away. At the end of the presentation at the Trismegistus Academy, where 7 LAFF students showed off their abilities to the rival school that they'll be competing against in the near future, Alsaya uses her super speed and sneaks away from her class to try and get help. Tagen of TAHE's Maverick class noticed her running off and chased her down. She tells him that she's trying to get away from the LAFF and about how awful Ludum is. He starts offering to help, but then suggests an alternative. They work together to take Elloise Ludum down. If you are enjoying this series, please consider liking, subscribing for more, and possibly sharing the series playlist with someone else who might enjoy it. Now let's get into the Trismegistus Academy, Chapter 3. Alsaya's legs twitched as she considered what this boy had said. She liked the idea of taking down the headmistress of the LAFF, but would that mean returning to Ludum's horrible school and dimension? How would we take her down? Alsaya asked, anxious that at any second Ludum would appear out of nowhere and drag her away. Honestly, I don't know, but having someone on the inside could be a huge help. Look, if you really need to get out of there, we should just get you out. Trust me, I know what it's like to think you've escaped a horrible prison just to be put back inside. Long story. But if we just get Headmistress Trismegistus to keep you away from Ludum now, Ludum might get nervous about the connection between our schools and cut ties with us. We might miss our shot to take her down and get the other students out of there. You're probably not the only student who wants to escape, right? Alsaya hadn't heard anyone else explicitly say so, but it had to be true. She hadn't talked openly about wanting to leave either, but that was just because she was scared of being sent out to the Little Lands again. She thought about Waru. He was a pretty sane person, compared to some of the other psychos at her school. If she was getting out, she'd at least want to get him out too. Though, with his powers, he was safer than most. This boy got closer and more softly said, "If you don't want to go back, you don't have to. It's not fair for me to ask you to risk your life sticking around a freak like Ludum. But if you are willing to go back and be our eyes and ears on the inside, I can give you this." He took a bulky watch-like device with a screen on it off his wrist and handed it to her. It's called a Mujwawood. Excuse me? He rolled his eyes. I know, I didn't name it, but the point is you can use it to contact, well, not exactly me, because I'm giving you mine, but my friend Anna, she goes here too. It's a piece of tech that a team of superheroes I'm a part of uses to jump around the multiverse and communicate with each other. Plus, even though Ludum's dimension is locked, it can get you out. Alsaya's eyes flashed wide. What? Seriously? How? Jake rocked his head back and forth. Again, it's a long story. The team has gone up against Ludum before and found a way to get through her locks, but the thing is, you can only use it to get out once, because as soon as you do, Ludum will sense that someone transported out of her universe and probably figure out it was you pretty quick. Going back after that will be too dangerous. Plus, if Ludum sees you with it, she might recognize it and, well, don't let that happen. She's not a fan of us and wouldn't be thrilled about you having some of our tech. Alsaya cautiously took the device. What if he was lying? What if it was some kind of bomb and he was just going to use it to blow a chunk of the LAFF up with Alsaya along with it? What if he actually wanted to go to the LAFF for some reason and sold her out to Ludum to get in? Or what if he just did something stupid like call her on the watch at a bad time and alert Ludum to her having it? Alsaya looked around. The green fields and marble architecture of this place were beautiful. It felt so peaceful here. Even the air smelled fresher. Just thinking about Ludum and her academy made Alsaya's body tremble. She could even smell the stench of Ludum's foul perfume and hairspray. But quickly, she realized that wasn't just from thinking about the LAFF. In a panic, she shoved the watch in her boot. "Okay, fine, I'm in, but tense your stomach really hard and play along." "What?" She punched him in the stomach, trying not to hit too hard, but making sure it looked real. She tapped each foot on the ground twice and her body shook with energy. Jake stumbled back from the hit, but leapt up into the air and hovered far enough that Alsaya couldn't reach. She sprinted around him in a circle, gained some momentum, then flung herself into the air, swinging her foot in a whirlwind. He threw up his arms to block. Her shins slammed into him and he spun back through the air, steadying out quickly. Green globs of slime illuminated around his hands. He tried hurling them at Alsaya, but she sprinted along the ground, zigzagging and avoiding every shot. She got some distance, then charged towards him and sprang off the ground again, thrusting both feet at him in a double kick. He flew up to try and dodge, but she still clipped his feet with her own, and he pinwheeled through the air. She landed in a slide, tearing up the beautiful grass as she did. This kid didn't seem to be a great fighter. Could she really trust him to help take down Ludum? She was just about to start running again when, out of nowhere, a golden light hammer swung at her. She tried to leap out of the way, but was slammed by it and flew back. Her whole body was shaken by the blow, but she managed to spin around, get her feet to the ground, and run to a stop. A furious-looking boy with floating, golden angel wings flew towards her, with the hammer soaring to meet his grip. "Get away from Jake, Ludum lover!" She braced for another hit when a gentle but powerful voice echoed across the field. That is quite enough." The boy grudgingly held back his swing and turned. Evangeline Trismegistus was walking briskly onto the scene, with Ludum and Alsaya's fellow LAFF students approaching behind her. Alsaya was glad that Ludum's scent was pungent enough to warn of her approach. As the tall, bird-faced headmistress walked up to Alsaya, she feared what TAHE's leader may try to do to her. But the fear was clearly misplaced. Evangeline looked over at Jake before speaking. He landed and nodded as if to say he was all right. Trismegistus then turned to Alsaya. "Ms. Laughmani, I understand combat and aggression are encouraged at your academy, but when you are on TAHE school grounds, we ask that you only engage in such behavior at the designated times." Was that seriously all this woman had to say? Alsaya looked past her to Ludum, who was approaching as well. "Yes, Alsaya, I love your enthusiasm, but remember that the softies here at TAHE can only emotionally handle a fight after they sit in a corner quietly and meditate on inner peace for a few hours first." Ludum put a hand proudly on Alsaya's shoulder, and it gave her a chill. "What say we head back to a real super school, Alsaya looked over at Jake, feeling the watch pressed against her leg in her boot. He better have been telling the truth about the thing being able to get her out of Ludum's realm. "Fine, I'll wait till our first tournament to beat up these softies," she said, hating every word of it. Ludum gave her a curious nod, then said, "Marvelous! Fiersome Fighters, with me!" 4 semi-translucent purple rings emerged from her arms and hovered forward. They all gathered together, then expanded. A portal appeared within them, and all the LAFF students filed in. As Alsaya approached, being led by Ludum's hand still on her shoulder, she considered running one more time. She could turn back now. She could get away from Ludum right this second and probably live a peaceful school life at TAHE. But feeling the grubby fingers of Ludum on her shoulder made her that much more eager to tear Ludum down. She stepped through the purple portal, going from the calming, serene nature of TAHE to the grim, gothic brick and concrete of Ludum's Academy's inner walls. The dark, castle-like structure behind Alsaya filled her with dread, but the idea of it crumbling gave her some sense of peace. The portal shrunk and disappeared as the 4 purple rings separated and moved back onto Ludum's arms. "Well done, students. I think we showed them what our academy is all about. Especially you, Alsaya. Unexpected of you to strike out on your own, but the initiative is appreciated all the same. Did that Jake boy cause you any trouble?" She just shook her head. "Just wanted to scope out their training sites, and he got in my way." Alsaya hadn't even gotten his name and was surprised Ludum had known it. Jake must have been telling the truth about being part of a team that had taken on Ludum before. Alsaya knew Ludum was awful, but was she seriously some kind of multiversal supervillain? Alsaya hoped she'd get a chance to ask soon. Ludum gave the 7 school representatives the rest of the day off. Alsaya's friend Waru had been with them too, which was good because he was the only person she thought she could trust with her and Jake's budding plan. He was headed towards the dorm rooms. She started to follow when the flaky face of Vinda de Mar stepped into her path. "You'll do anything to kiss up to Ludum, huh, Laughmani?" Alsaya rolled her eyes. "Back off, Vinda." Alsaya tried to march past her, but Vinda swung her gangly tail at Alsaya's legs. The tail hit, but Alsaya's speed was still active enough that she felt it and thrust her legs back, using the momentum to throw and land a backflip, then rapidly punch Vinda in the face 3 times before kicking her full force into the nearest wall. Vinda quickly pushed back off the wall, and out of her shoulder emerged another arm, then another as one of her fiends that she could spawn was clawing its way out of her flesh. Ladies, please," Ludum said, strutting between them. "You have all made me so proud today already. Save this little scrap for tomorrow. You'll have ample excuse to tear each other apart in the Cavern Coliseum." She turned to Vinda. "Remember this embarrassing strike Alsaya laid upon you, Vinda. Keep that hatred with you for tomorrow. Hatred is excellent fuel for victory." Vinda snarled but nodded as her fiend's limb slid back inside her. She looked at Alsaya and slashed her tail across her throat, as if to say, "You're dead." Alsaya didn't care. Vinda was tough, but Alsaya could take her when she was fully focused, which she'd certainly be for the Coliseum competition the next day. Alsaya ran into the westernmost tower of the school grounds to get to the dorms. There were 2 of these towers on opposite ends of the school, but Alsaya and Waru lived in the west end. The round tower rose 25 stories, with a spiral stone stairwell in the middle. Each floor had 20 rooms. Alsaya was on the 16th floor, and Waru was on the 13th. She managed to catch up to him on the stairs. "Waru! Hey Waru! I gotta talk to you. Can I come back to your room?" "I'm flattered, Laughmani, but I told you, I'm not into you. I like older women," he said with a smirk. Waru was tall with mostly black hair, save for a single red spurt that dangled in front of his face. He was only 16, but acted like he was much older than everyone else in their class. He was a pretty chill guy, but also had an annoying habit of never taking anything seriously. "Shut up, Waru, this is important." She looked up ahead and behind them, then quietly said, I think I've got a way to get a bunch of us out of here. We could escape." "Couldn't you have escaped like 5 minutes ago if you really wanted to? Honestly, I thought that's what you'd done when I saw you run off," he said as he kept walking up the stairs, reaching the 13th floor. I was, but then I got a better offer." Waru punched a combination into the stone buttons on his door, and it unlocked. He opened it slowly, but then Alsaya shoved him in and slammed it behind her. His bed was unmade, and there were manga comics scattered all over a wooden table that every room had. There was nowhere to buy books at the LAFF, but he'd brought some from home and had bribed some of the scouts to get him more. Waru may have acted like a bit of a deadbeat, but he could always get whatever he wanted when he wanted it. Alsaya had even considered asking him to help her escape once before, but she figured that was beyond even him. "Look, what I'm gonna tell you, you can't tell anyone else ever, okay? I don't know who in our class we can trust." He flopped back on his bed, yawning. Yup, okay. She pulled the watch out of her boot. Waru barely glanced at it, but then said, "If you want a new look, I have suggestions, and none of them involve a clunky bracelet." "That Jake kid gave it to me. He said it could get me out of here if I needed it to, but it could also allow me to communicate with one of his friends at TAHE. We're gonna work together to get anyone who wants out of this school out, and to take down Ludum." He nodded sarcastically. "Wow, well, more luck to you." She grabbed a book off his table and hurled it at his head. Without looking, he caught it. "Thanks, but I've finished this one. Can you toss me Jujutsu Kaisen Volume 11? "Do you seriously not want to get out of here? You've been to the Little Lands too. Even with your powers, you know we might die here way before we graduate." He shrugged. "Trust me, death isn't as big a deal as people think. Besides, I like it here. I've lived a safe life before, and it was so boring. At least this place is exciting." "Well, fine, you can stay all you want, but don't you care about anyone else? Don't you think there are other kids like me that got tricked into coming here and now want to leave? And not risk dying? Don't you have any heart at all?" Waru rolled his eyes so much that his whole head rocked, but he finally sat up and looked at her. "Fine, I guess I don't want you to die. Plus, taking down a psychopath school from the inside Could be exciting too. What do you want from me? Just help me figure out who else in the school might want to get out of here and who we could bring into the plan. I mean, Jake and I don't really have a plan, but we're gonna need numbers, and I'm sure there are other kids who are just keeping quiet about wanting to escape. He sarcastically saluted. Righto, Captain. Now can you let me get down to reading? We don't get a whole free afternoon that often. Waru may have been infuriating, but at least he was in. That made one person, but besides him, Alsaya had no idea where to start. She shoved the watch in her boot and hurried back to her room. Her own bed was well made and her desk empty, other than a picture of her on Delilah's shoulders when she was younger. It broke her heart every time she saw it, but also kept her determined to stay alive to figure out who killed her older sister. That was still her ultimate goal, but Ludum needed to be put in her place just as badly as the monster that had taken Delilah away. Alsaya sat on her bed, fidgeting with the watch for nearly an hour, unsure of what to do with it. She didn't even want to turn it on out of risk that she'd do something that would alert Ludum to her having it. She felt so alone. She didn't know if she could actually trust this Jake guy, and even if Waru knew the plan now, he seemed to barely care. As she often had over the last few months, Alsaya just wished Delilah was there to help her. As she thought, she fidgeted with the device. The watch was round and mostly silver with 2 gold bars on either side that attached to a black leathery strap. There were no buttons, but eventually she built up the courage to press her finger on the screen. It illuminated and 2 text boxes appeared, one read screen and the other read hologram. She pressed hologram because it sounded cooler. A green light projected into the air above the watch, revealing more text boxes. The options read, call teammate, call group, multiverse jump, and games. Alsaya tapped on call teammate and a long list of names and images appeared, presumably showing all the different people on the superhero team Jake was a part of. Had all of these people worked together to take out Ludum and they still hadn't succeeded? How were Alsaya and Jake going to pull it off then? She scrolled down until she saw a name she remembered, Anna. That was who Jake had said she could call, Anna Fens. Alsaya's heart was pounding as she pressed on Anna's image. 2 more options popped up, call Anna and send recorded message. Alsaya wanted to call. She wanted to talk to someone, but she was scared. What if this Anna person wasn't on board? What if Ludum could detect the call? Alsaya was terrified, but couldn't do nothing. She hit send recorded message. Hi, Anna, this is Alsaya. I don't know if Jake has told you what's up, but I'm gonna start trying to find other kids who want out. I told my friend Waru. He's an idiot who doesn't want out, but he's gonna help me find out who does. I just don't know who else I can trust. I'm gonna leave the watch in my room so nobody sees it. I guess messages are safer, but we'll probably talk in a call at some point, I guess. Bye? She had no idea what else to say, so she just sent it. She tossed the watch down onto her bed and lay back with a hand over her eyes. Why had she come back here? This place was horrible. Most of the kids here were crazy anyway. Maybe none of them wanted to leave. Though the thought did cross her mind. Delilah would have come back here to help the other kids, no matter how crazy they were. Alsaya wasn't sure how long she lay there, but eventually the bed buzzed. She sat up and looked at the watch. The screen was illuminated. She tapped it, and a hologram appeared above with Anna's image. It was an incoming call. Nervously, she pressed answer. A full-color video feed showed a blue-skinned girl with purple hair. She smiled in a friendly but slightly anxious way.
Hi, you're Alsaya, right?
Yeah, Anna?
Yeah, that's me. Sorry I didn't see your message earlier. I don't always keep my mujwawood on me. Jake told me what's going on, and I definitely want to help. I also wanted to say it's super brave of you to be willing to go back to Ludum's school. Jake and I never fought her ourselves, but from everything we know from our friends, she's done a lot of really horrible things.
Alsaya's heartbeat slowed, sensing how kind this Anna girl was. Yeah, she's a maniac. I don't know anything about her from before she ran this school, but it doesn't surprise me that people have been trying to take her down.
Yeah, our friends were fighting her back when she used to make these awful death arenas where she'd kidnap people from across the multiverse and make them fight till there was only one person or creature left alive.
Alsaya groaned. Wow, so she's always been a psycho, huh? I can't believe how stupid I was to come to her school.
Hey, don't say that, okay? You didn't know, and she's probably really good at manipulating people. This isn't your fault, but you're doing a great thing by helping us get other kids away from her. You're a good person, Alsaya.
Alsaya almost started tearing up just hearing that. It was so strange talking to a genuinely supportive person after all this time at Ludum's Academy. It almost felt like talking to Delilah again. They chatted a little while longer, and it really calmed Alsaya down. Anna was a bit timid, but she was really sweet. Anna said she wouldn't always have the watch on her, but she'd make sure to check it regularly, and Jake would as well. They were trying to figure out who at their school to bring in on the plan too. Anna also reminded Alsaya that if she did ever get in serious trouble, just use the Mujwawut to get out of there. She said instead of going to the Trismegistus Academy to get away, it may be better to go to Dimension A016, which was the base of their team of superhero friends. Anna said the watch would take Alsaya to a hill just above their headquarters, and anyone there would be happy to help her. When you teleported into TAHE, unless given another way in by the faculty, you'd appear in the Nexus Pyramid and not be able to access the school without passing something called the Resonance Test. There was no such limit on Dimension A016. Anna had to get going to a class, but Alsaya thanked her for the conversation. When they hung up, she hid the watch away in a spare pair of boots and shoved it far under her bed. She didn't do much else that day, other than think up ways to take down Ludum and think of who in the school may want out. She had a few ideas of students to talk to, but none of them were clear enough to be definitive choices. Eventually, Alsaya went to sleep early, knowing she'd be awakened early the next day for a grueling day of combat. She was woken up, as everyone was, by a blaring, wailing alarm that bellowed through the dorm tower. Alsaya got ready quickly, but before leaving, checked the watch. On the screen it read, "One new message." She desperately wanted to check it, but knew if it was longer than a couple minutes, it'd make her late. Late students often got some kind of hindrance in the arena matches. Alsaya couldn't afford that with Vinda ready to hunt her down. A few classes, including Alsaya's, met at one of the school's 4 arenas, this one called the Cavern Coliseum. It was beneath the school, was dark, and had one massive room connected by a series of tunnels that were easy to get lost in. Knowing what Ludum had done before running this school seemed pretty obvious to Alsaya in hindsight, given the challenges the students were put through in arenas like this every 2 weeks or so. One of their multiple combat instructors, Kesar Kekuat, stood before the 4 classes, totaling roughly 120 students. He was a very muscular man with fanged teeth and big spiky blue hair. He kinda looked like something out of one of Waru's manga comics. Behind him there were a dozen crates overflowing with belts that each had 3 glowing beacons on them, but space for more to be added. "Alright, runts, listen up. Out in the multiverse, you're never gonna know who you can trust or where your next enemy is gonna come from. Truth is, nobody can be trusted, but at least you might be able to make mutually beneficial arrangements in the short term. Today you can do that, or you can just play it smart and take this challenge on without any team-ups." He gestured to the bins. "You're all gonna take a belt. You start with 3 beacons, and once you steal enough to have a full set of 8, you finish the challenge, and just gotta bring your belt back to me to get out. Only 1 beacon can be removed at a time, and the more beacons you get, the brighter your belt is gonna glow to alert more people to your location. Anyone who doesn't win is stuck in the arena for the full 8 hours. If you drop down to 0 beacons, well, just don't, or you'll get some much needed encouragement to get yours back." Alsaya didn't like the sound of that, but with her speed she wasn't too concerned. She glanced across her class and saw Vinda glaring out of the side of her eye at Alsaya with a vicious grin. Having fiends to go snag beacons for her was going to be a big advantage. Alsaya tried to ignore her and look around at the other students' expressions to see if anyone else looked scared. If they did, that may make them a good candidate for approaching about escaping the school and fighting back against Ludum. Alsaya felt a gooey hand press against her back. She jumped a bit and turned her head. Behind her was Sammy Slazar. In his casual form, his body was split into normal flesh and purple dripping slime. He could shift the viscosity of the slime and make it change from slippery to incredibly sticky. He could also stretch his gooey limbs about 30 feet before he started losing control of them.
Hey Laughmani, what do you say to a team up, yeah? Your speed, my sticky fingers. I can help you get Vinda's crazy self off your back, and you help me finish faster and jump up the 7 rankings, yeah? Win-win.
As far as fighters in their class went, Sammy wasn't one of the more savage and ruthless, but he was skilled.
How do you know I need to get Vinda off my back?
He chuckled.
Because it's Vinda, and you're you. Guessing you didn't see her face when you got subbed into the top representative over Waru.
Huh. She hadn't, but she imagined it wasn't pleasant. Alsaya gave him a sharp nod. It would be nice to have someone backing her up. Waru would have been an incredibly powerful ally, but he tended to be more of an I work alone type. Kekuat suddenly tossed a belt towards Alsaya's class. A few students reached for it, but Vinda shot her tail into the air and snatched it. She pulled it down into her hands and started putting it on. Kekuat pulled out a remote with a big dial on it. Alright, as soon as I say go, the game is on, and everyone has to come get a belt. No beacons can be removed for the first 5 minutes, and if I see anyone taking a second belt... He pointed the remote at Vinda and cranked it up. Electricity burst off the belt and she shrieked, then dropped to her knees. Got it? Good. Go. Before he'd finished speaking, Alsaya tapped her feet so she could super speed over to the closest crate before anyone else. She grabbed a belt and tossed it to Sammy to confirm their partnership. He caught it, then she grabbed her own, glancing over at Kekuat to see if he'd zap her for technically taking 2. He didn't. Sammy stretched one goopy leg to fling himself forward over the crates onto the other side, and he started running next to Alsaya towards one of the tunnels. He glanced back towards the students, all brawling over belts.
I've got an idea. Vinda may want to get you the most, but she's a sucker for torturing anyone she thinks is a threat. Once we can get the beacons off, I'll give you 2 of mine, so it looks like I've only got 1 left. Then I'll run out into the open near her. She won't be able to resist coming to get me, so she can see what happens when someone loses the last beacon, right? Then you sneak in and hit her while she's coming after me. Once she turns for you, I'll grab another, and just like that, we've got it down to 1 beacon left, and we're both up 1.
Alsaya was astounded by how trusting he was to just give her his beacons. Maybe he really would be willing to help her take down Ludum.
I like your thinking, but she'll probably be way more distracted if I give you 2 of mine, so I only have 1 left, and we act like you betrayed me.
He shrugged.
Yeah, guess that makes sense. Let's just make sure she... Oh, yeah, she's definitely still coming for you.
Alsaya glanced back and saw Vinda with 2 lanky, flaking-skinned fiends running next to her. Sammy leapt onto Alsaya's back, and she picked up speed and shot into the tunnel. She was slowed down significantly carrying someone, but still far faster than most kids in their class. As she moved, Sammy intentionally dripped his purple slime onto the ground so Vinda would have something to follow. The first 5 minutes passed, so the beacons were unlocked. Alsaya set Sammy down, and they kept walking quickly away from where Vinda would be coming. Alsaya took 2 of her beacons off and handed them to Sammy. He clipped them to his belt.
Okay,
Alsaya said.
She's not nearly as fast as me, so we've probably got a couple minutes, but I'm thinking we put a bunch of your goop on me, and I'll act like it's the really thick kind that slows people down. You grab onto one of the dangling stalactites above and wait until she gets close to me. Try covering the light of your beacons so she doesn't notice you up there. She gets distracted, you goo her up with some of your actually thick slime, and I have my speed activated already so I can run at her and grab another beacon.
He smiled.
Taking charge, are ya? I like it, Captain Laughmani. Gonna avoid getting none of this in your hair, though. Can be real tough to get out, especially with the curly mop you got.
She didn't care for how he described her hair, but appreciated the thought. He wiped his long purple hand over her body, and she instantly regretted the decision, but knew it made for a good plan.
It still feels kind of thick and sticky. Is this really the thinnest you can go? Pretty much, yeah. But don't worry, it'll thin out the longer you got it on. Alright, I'm gonna hide.
He flung his arm above and grabbed the stalactite, then yanked himself up, hiding on the side away from where Vinda would be coming. It took a few more minutes, but soon Alsaya heard clawed footsteps scrambling down the tunnel. Alsaya started yelling like she was furious at Sammy and was going to hunt him down. She knelt on the floor, acting like she was wiping the goop off her, as 2 fiends rounded the corner and hissed at her. Soon followed by Vinda, grinning and lashing her tail against the ground. Alsaya tried to act concerned as her vengeful classmate approached. Look at the once great school representative getting taken down by, rank 7? I hope Headmistress Ludum gets a good look at you like this. Maybe she'll send you to the Little Lands for a whole day this time. Alsaya got a genuine chill thinking about that possibility, and leaned into the feeling to keep up her performance. Yeah, well, at least you're here so I can steal one of your beacons. She acted like she was having a hard time getting up, but noticed that the slime on her was getting even stickier. She had to peel her knee off the ground. Looking a little stuck there, Vinda said, her flaking lips sliding into a vile grin. Looks like you gave her the wrong slime, huh, Sammy?
Would you look at that, silly me?
Sammy dropped down from the stalactite, standing right next to Vinda.
It's a wonder I can even keep me head on straight,
he said, converting his neck to slime and spinning his head around in a circle. He unclipped one of Alsaya's beacons and stuck it right to Vinda's belt.
All squared up? Now, first one to snag a third beacon gets to keep it.
Fighting through the goo, Alsaya stood up.
Sammy, you slimy traitor! Oh, is it say something obvious time? How's about this then? Super speed is a boring superpower. You being the head school rep doesn't make no sense to anyone, and it's time you got bumped out of the top 7, permanent-like.
He stretched his arm out to the side and it arced towards her. Vinda marched forward, lashing her tail again, while her fiends surrounded Alsaya. She slid her feet across the stony ground, wiping off as much of the slime as she could. She thought this is what she deserved for trusting anyone. Alsaya knew this wouldn't be an easy fight, but there was no way she'd let them get her last beacon. She tapped each foot 3 times on the ground, and her body shook so much her vision started to go blurry. But at least some of the slime started vibrating off of her. Vinda whipped her tail for Alsaya's head, but she dodged it easily, then sprinted forward. A wide, gooey hand reached in front of her path, but she slid under it, leapt up, and punched Vinda right under the chin. As Vinda's body flung up into the air, Alsaya reached up to grab one of her beacons, but a fiend wrapped itself around her arm and bit into her glove, stopping her. It didn't break through, but still hurt. Alsaya rapidly punched it 6 times in the head, and chunks of its skull puffed off as she struck. But then the other fiend latched onto her swinging arm. She yanked her arms down and managed to slam both of them into the ground. But as soon as she did, she was smacked in the back by a gooey foot. She slammed face first into the wall and turned quickly, but felt sluggish, with heavy, thick goop stuck to her back from where Sammy's blow had struck. He swung a stretchy fist at her, forcing her to lean back. Her shoulders hit the wall and instantly stuck to it. She pulled hard to get free, but it was a slow process, and she didn't have time. Vinda's tail lashed towards her, and Alsaya raised her arms to block it. But the surprisingly sturdy limb slashed right through the thick sleeves on Alsaya's arms and tore through her flesh. She clenched her teeth to avoid crying out in pain as she finally pulled free from the wall and darted down the tunnel, skidding to a stop to give herself a second to recover. The fiends scrambled after Alsaya as Vinda and Sammy casually walked towards her. She could run, but if she did, she wouldn't get her beacons back. Then again, her odds of winning seemed to be slipping. Maybe she should just retreat. Before she could decide, she noticed a new light source illuminating the ground from behind her. Ugh, seriously, Laughmani, did you not smell the betrayal the second Gooball suggested a team-up? She turned around and Waru, hands shoved deep in his pockets, was walking up behind her. 3 glowing orbs, one red, one yellow, and one white, all hovered around him. You're smarter than to fall for something like this. Vinda and Sammy both stopped in their tracks. The fiends didn't, and had nearly reached Alsaya. Waru flicked a finger and the red orb flew right into his chest. His lean body suddenly became far more muscular. He dug his feet into the ground and leapt forward so forcefully that debris shot behind him. He snagged one of the fiends, grabbing it off its path so hard that part of its legs stayed behind. He skidded to a stop, tearing up the ground as he slid, then whipped around and hurled the fiend into the other. Their bodies collided and exploded into little more than debris. He flicked his finger again, and the red light flew back out of him, then the yellow replaced it. His muscles shrunk back to normal size, but he hovered up off the ground, with dust rising around him. So, is asking nicely enough to make you give back Alsaya's beacons, or are we gonna have ourselves a little scrap? Alsaya would have rather won this fight herself, but was relieved to have Waru backing her up. It was nice to know she could at least somewhat trust him to help. As he hovered before their enemies, Alsaya noticed something about his belt. Waru, did you lose all your beacons already? Alsaya asked, confused. He shrugged. I stored them somewhere I could go get them back later. Wanted to see what happens when you lose them all. So, watch out behind you. Before Alsaya could ask what he meant, she heard echoing down the tunnel a familiar, horrible, cackling laughter. I haven't really gotten into Waru's whole story and concept yet, but honestly, it itself could have been a whole spin-off series, but it also fit really nicely into this series, so I'm excited to flesh that out more, and for you all to learn what his whole deal is. Anyway, I have a few other ongoing series right now, blah blah blah, you know, the whole usual ending spiel. I'm not in the mood to do the whole thing right now. So besides that, that's all for today, except of course we're ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave you with is a quote I read this week from Morgan Freeman, who said, "Don't let getting lonely make you reconnect with toxic people. You shouldn't drink poison just because you're thirsty." Now, I don't love the whole idea of labeling people as toxic. I think it gets thrown around a bit too much. I'd rather label specific actions as toxic. But I think broadly as general advice, that's pretty good stuff. Hanging out with the wrong people that you don't resonate with will just make you feel more lonely. And your people are out there. I hope that's inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Monday. Fear of the Demon Hunters, Episode 3. See you there. Goodbye.